Hey YouTube, thanks for joining today. A little bit about my background, betting sports for around 20 years, put a lot of time, effort into it. Hope to start this channel to help to kind of share some of the things that I've learned, some of the things that have helped me over time across my sports betting journey. Hopefully can help you to do the same. So that being said, first video today, we're going to be covering the 5 different types of sports gamblers and really how every one of them can do better. My personal mentality: try to take anything you do, try to do it the best you can. A lot of things that I say no to because it's not going to be my full effort. So sports betting's always been my full effort. I hope that people can appreciate that mentality and use it to get better results. So without further ado, so the first gambler that I wanted to talk about, I refer to them as the nuts on top bettor. So it's from an old Simpsons episode where Lisa, Homer Simpson's daughter, is excellent at picking football picks, and Homer is trying to explain to her sports gambling, and he says, when you have a sundae, you like just plain ice cream, you like sauce and nuts on top, and she says nuts on top, and he says that's what sports gambling is. You have sports, which is very nice in the first place. You add the nuts on top of it, and it just makes it better. So when I'm talking about the nuts on top gambler, so really the focus of this particular bettor is more on the sports and less on the gambling. These tend to be pretty significant sports fans, a lot of interest in the topic. They pick up the gambling really on a side, something to make the game more interesting. So these gamblers also would tend to bet not as many parlays, more straight bets, really few props as well. Maybe if we're talking NFL season, maybe a quarterback yard prop, something like that, but these aren't the people who'd be, the third string running back. Is he going to have 2 or more touches in the game? Very straightforward, very common place bets. They also tend to bet more televised games and really only bet games, sports that they like. So this is the type of bettor who, on the train home from work on a Monday night is looking at the game. Which side do I like? Because I'm going to watch the game later either way. Let me put a few bucks on it to make it a little bit more interesting. Additionally, these gamblers tend to really only bet on the sports they like. In the U.S., where I am, a lot of NFL football, a lot of college football to a lesser extent, NBA to a lesser extent. March Madness would be another big time, but really they have specific things that they like and specific things they don't like. You never catch this person wagering on, La Liga or Bundesliga if they're in the U.S. because it's not really a sport that they follow. So how can this gambler do better? So first, you may be thinking, this is a stone cold sucker. This is a horrible way to do things. They're definitely going to lose. And they are definitely going to lose. But I actually like this type of gambler more than some of the other ones I cover. I think that the nuts on top bettors, as I refer to them, they tend to be more honest. There's not really a heavy expectation in their mind that they'll win. They go off the knowledge of sports that they have. But many of them, who I had conversations with, they tend to be pretty honest about kind of where they expect to be. So if I'm a sports book, I like this customer. They're not going to do too much damage to themselves. They're certainly not going to do too much damage to me. So all around, not as bad as it could be. So for this particular bettor, they're probably not willing to put in the work to be better at sports betting in general. This person's not going to try to build a model for the NFL. They're not going to try to sit there and wait for the odds all day in order to catch them this pricing. So really simple things for these bettors, and if you find yourself in that situation, really simple things to learn. If I was speaking to one of them, I would say, what book do you use? They'd say, DraftKings or FanDuel. Say, okay, why don't you take half of what you have in DraftKings, put it in Caesars, put it in Bet365, another book, and just when you go to bet, just make sure that you're getting the best line that you can. And it's not going to turn you usually from a loser into a winner, but it can help to cut down on your losses. A percentage here, a percentage there, over a lifetime of betting is a lot of money. So take advantage while you can. It's not that difficult for them to do, and it's a really easy step for them to just be a little bit better. So moving on. So I would consider this next type of bettor, I would call them the gambler. So these are people who, it's not as much about the sports, it's more about the gambling. So they tend to bet other things as well. They'll have a sportsbook account. They'll also use the casino that comes with their sportsbook account. Go to physical land-based casinos. Gamble on a cruise, things like that. They also tend to bet sports, not really make the optimal mix of bets within their sports betting. A lot of teasers, 10-team parlays, 18 parlays, 17 parlays, really poor odds bets, because they more are into the feeling of gambling versus really trying to attempt to win. There's not a lot of trying to pick the right game. It's more guts and feel and things like that. I've known people who I've been associated with who, would stare at the lines for the upcoming NFL Sunday football games for hours at a time, trying to see something in the cards to which way to bet. It's not going to work. Their results are going to be the same. It's not really a way that you get good results. So these people like to gamble. They'll always be a long-term loser. It's not going to work long-term for them to win. There's not a lucky streak that they're going to go on, short of, they hit a 15-team parlay and magically decide to stop betting. But that's not really how things usually work. So this type of bettor can really stretch from, people who are long-term losers who like to bet, and it's not really that big a deal. You take a guy maybe makes $150K a year, loses $3,000 a year betting on things. It's not the end of the world. It's his hobby. There are other hobbies that are just as expensive. It's not that big a deal. But this stretches also to, what we consider problem gamblers, where it's a serious detriment to their life, and you don't want to have something that should be fun be a serious detriment to your life. So, for those people, the best thing you can do is stop and get help. For people who are more kind of long-term losers, but it's not necessarily detrimental to their life, same advice as I would say to the nuts on top bettor: learn to line shop. Maybe minimize your action, look at the edge across a number of bets, and try to move to ones with lower edges. And if you go from betting parlays with house edges that are greater than 10%, and you move to betting straight bets with edges that are about 4.5% or so, you're going to see results long term. You're not going to win, but you're not going to lose as much. And so really, for that subset of sports bettors, learn the odds and try to do things in the best way. So moving on to really the third type of bettor that I would consider is people who've stopped along the way on the journey to becoming a winning sports bettor. So these people are attempting to win, but they're attempting to win in unsophisticated ways. So this is things such as reading a lot of news articles like, okay, all the NFL games happen on Sunday. I'm going to sit there on Monday and Tuesday. I'm going to read every article that I can about how the games went, and I'll learn things through that I can then use to make better picks, which people don't win like that. It's a difficult thing to conceive of, but think of how many formulas and how much math and how much odds would go into an NFL football game. Every pass, every run, whether they fumble, whether they miss a field goal. There's not really a way that your mind's going to wrap around that correctly. These people also tend to have a little bit worse of a mindset as far as more successful sports bettors are going to see games as probabilities and not games as stories yet to be written. This is a topic for another video that I'd love to make on this at a later date. Other things are folk sayings. I'm sure everybody's heard the term "fade the public," things like that aren't. Who is the public? It's not really a way to win, and it's not something that's going to give you outsized results enough to the point that you will cover the odds. Other things that they would look at are things like trends. This team's 10-2 in this particular spot, and I'm going to take that because of that, which is a problem in and of itself. It's another topic for another video, but sufficient to say, if you're not thinking of games as odds and probability, you're not going to be a long-term winner. And the trends, the people who follow trends, do not think of games like that, or they think of them in really an unsophisticated manner. The last action that this group tends to take is buying picks from touts. You have to think of what mentality would lead you to buy picks from touts. The first would be that it is possible to win at sports betting, which for our other two groups, both the nuts on top and the gambler, they may not actually believe that. It may be that nobody wins, so nobody should try. But if you believe that some people win, it would make sense that some people who win would be willing to sell you the ability to win for a price. I mean, the truth of the matter is that that's false, and generally if you're buying picks from somebody, they are scamming you. Topic for another video, but if somebody is able to pick enough to both cover the odds and cover the fees that you would pay them for their picks, they could probably make more money just betting themselves. So all of these actions, well, they make sense as ways you possibly can win at sports. They're not going to relate to you actually winning long term at sports. So these people tend to be a little bit more sophisticated than the other groups. They understand maybe basic stuff like line shopping. They understand odds a little bit. They still lose, but part of this and taking more of a systematic approach to sports betting, they tend to do a little bit better than, say, your gambler. And for these people, I would say, to get better, you got to continue your journey. You started the journey of trying to win. You took certain actions. You looked up trends. You bought picks from touts or whatever. Really, what you need to do is to let go of your illusions. Winning at sports betting is not going to be an easy journey. It's going to be a very difficult one, and it's going to require learning. It's going to require letting go of your ego. It's going to require a lot of steps. So kind of decide along the way if you want to just go back to being, the first category we covered. You bet sports sometimes because you're going to watch the game, you want to make it more interesting, or if winning at sports betting is really something that you want to do. And if that's the case, you have to let go of the idea that it's going to be easy. Because if it was easy, there wouldn't be sports books. So moving on to our next category, we're getting into the category of sports bettors who actually can win long term. The first I'm going to cover is modelers, and I consider myself part of this group. It's been my hobby probably for about the last 10 years. So your modelers are going to attempt to use math, statistics, programming to create a better line than the market has. One of the things to keep in mind here is your mileage may vary. It's really dependent on how good you are at predicting the line. Some modelers are long-term losers. Their models aren't good, or they don't test them enough, or a range of other factors that cause them still to be losers. This can be a range though, because even if, say, you got to the point where you're winning 51%, it's not enough to cover the house edge, but you're doing better than someone naively picking games. So some of them may make very great models and win consistently. There are some sports where I've won consistently year after year after year, for a number of years. I can kind of conclude at this point that my models for those particular sports are decent enough. But other sports, not as much. I build things, they don't work. You have to let them go, and you have to try again. That's really the best way to go about it. This is completely dependent on how good you are at modeling. One of the things to keep in mind is it is still uncertainty. You still can lose for longer than you think you can. And that's, there's a quote by Keynes where he says, the market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. And I think it applies here as well, that, sports can remain irrational and you think you should be winning, the numbers tell you should be winning, but still you lose. And that's just something that you have to deal with sometimes. But a lot of people who've come to this step have gotten a certain level of discipline towards their betting. So it doesn't really affect them as much as some other bettors where if they're losing, they may try to chase. Most of the people who are modelers have gotten to the point where they understand that that's not a winning strategy and that's not going to lead to long-term good results. So one of the things that I think modelers tend to get is a little overconfident. And, I'm no better than you. I'm guilty of the same thing. It can affect your results. You think I can win at one sport with a model, I can win at a different sport with a different model, and reality comes and slaps you in the face and says, no, that's not true. So really, for this group, and again, I'm one of you, I would say just second guess yourself, temper your confidence. Just make sure before you put anything into play that you're doing the proper testing, that you're back testing thoroughly, and that you're 100% confident prior to putting it into action. And that you're not overconfident and bet too much based on the assumption that you're going to win. So one of the things that I would say as well is keep grinding, keep going, you're on the right track, but make sure to question your assumptions along the way. I think that's the best. There's been things where maybe I had a winning year in a particular sport, but some parts of it didn't work as much as I wanted to. So let me go back, let me break that, let me question the assumptions that I put into that model, make some changes, and hopefully the next year be better. So even people who are winning, you can still do things to make your results to the next level. So the last group I wanted to talk about, I call these group the traders. And so they don't really try to predict games. It's not really the result of the actual game. They solely try to place bets based on mispricing. This could be a lot of different things. So this could be off-market lines of books. This could be that, say, the Giants are playing the Cowboys and the Giants are +5 at 11 different books, and at the 12th book, the Giants are +7. So I would then take the Giants +7 because it's an off-market line comparable to what I have in the market. This can also be used between books that you would consider to be more what they call recreational versus sophisticated. A more sophisticated book would put more effort into having accurate lines that they publish, whereas a recreational book may be having lines through a line service, they may be copying other books, but in the case that there's a delay of them doing that, there can be a window of opportunity for people to come in and bet this mispriced line. Some of the other activities that these people have done is things like mispricing point buying prices. So say that they're charging you 8 cents for a half point, but they're charging all half points the same. Anybody who did some research would know that in the NFL, buying onto 3 or buying off of 3 is a larger price than just 8 cents. So these people, especially more in the past when bookmaking was a little bit less sophisticated, would be able to take advantage of those sorts of mispricing. Another area as well is misprices between full games. I don't like the term derivative, but people use the term derivative bets, things like props, quarters, halves, things like that. There can be some mismatches, especially in the past, that occurred between how quarters were priced versus how whole games were priced. So there's a lot of sophisticated bettors who took advantage of that level of mispricing, blindly bet, things like that. Another tactic that these types of bettors use is what's called chasing steam, which is where a number of books will make an adjustment very quickly. So this can be related to injuries as well. There's some people who do this with injuries where, say, an NBA game, LeBron James is out, the line's certainly going to move. say 5 books make a move from 3 points to 5 points immediately as they adjust their lines, and one book is a little bit delayed on making that move. People will watch the lines, they'll hit that game quickly before that one book has the time to update its lines. So that's chasing steam. As I mentioned, very common in the NBA with injuries because the NBA is pretty dependent on star players. One of the other areas that they'll engage in is sports arbitrage, where there'll be a mispriced game to the point where you can bet both sides to guarantee a small profit. So one thing about this group is they are the sportsbook's least favorite customer. Frequently limited, frequent account closures in the day. Back in the days of offshore betting, often these people would have their accounts closed because there'd be terms of service when you signed up that would say, I won't engage in arbitrage, I won't bet bad lines, I won't bet things like that. So not really their favorite people to deal with. I think that they tolerate the modelers more because the modelers are wrong sometimes. For a trader, it tends to be very obvious when someone's engaging in this sort of activity. I mean, if you were an American and you were betting on, German handball at 2 in the morning, and they know generally when their lines were mispriced, so it's pretty obvious to them when you're making these kinds of bets what your strategy is, and they tend not to like it. One of the things about this sort of activity is actually declining over years. The books are getting smarter in how they do things. I remember back around 2007, 2008, there was a lot more opportunities for this. There was a lot more opportunities for arbitrage. I mean, even before that, if you're talking 2004, 2003, there was a lot more books and they were not managed as well. So books are attempting to close these loopholes. So one of the things that this particular strategy requires is a large time investment. So usually these people will have a bunch of monitors up, they'll be watching the line movements all day, they'll buy services that will give them very quick updates to the lines. So a lot of time commitment. It requires a lot of quick action. Oftentimes the opportunities are only for minutes at a time where you can get in quickly and make that advantage bet. There's some service providers that will do it for you, so for these people, how they can get better, a lot of the more sophisticated people that are engaging in this that I've interacted with, a lot of the focus is on kind of disguising these efforts, maybe throwing a bet in randomly on a game just so that your account's not always making those kind of advantage type plays. I think this is a smart strategy. Like I said, it can be very obvious from the books who's engaging in this and when. So especially with those of us who are betting with US facing books, this is the source of a lot of the I was limited after 5 bets complaints, because they made 5 odd bets on odd sports that don't really fit the pattern of what a normal, for lack of better words, unsophisticated customer is going to bet. So they're very easy to identify. So I think for these people, really the question is, try to be a little less obvious, and hopefully that'll allow you to last a little bit longer. Because when these types of bettors lose access to books, they lose their entire opportunity set. If someone who's a modeler, you can't line shop, but your lines are still more accurate, you can still bet as if you have 1 or 2 books. But for the traders, they really require that level of mispricing, and the books that tend to limit the quickest tend to be the ones that have those most obvious errors. So it can be a difficult problem to solve, but I think for this group, really try to be a little less obvious about what you're doing going forward. So that wraps it up. The 5 types of sports bettors, how they can do better. Please like and subscribe. I'd like to continue making this comment. Hope to bring you, theory such as this, also modeling tips, how to backtest, maybe some web scraping of lines and statistics, some mathematical pricing formulas, things like that. So please like and subscribe. I really appreciate you all taking the time. Have a great day. Thanks.